named Tom Rainer. And he's done a lot of church research over the years. And he compiled a list of the 25 most ridiculous disputes ever in churches from his research. I'm going to read you not all 25, but a good chunk of those 25 disputes. First of all, there was an argument over the appropriate length of the worship pastor's beard. That was one dispute. Here's another dispute. A fight over whether or not to build a children's playground or to use the land for a cemetery. And he says, I'm dying to know the resolution of this one. No pun intended. A deacon accusing another deacon of sending an anonymous letter and deciding to settle the matter in the parking lot. A church dispute of whether or not to install restroom stall dividers in the women's restroom. A church argument and vote to decide if a clock in the worship center should be removed. A 45-minute heated argument over the type of filing cabinet to purchase. A fight over which picture of Jesus to put in the foyer. A petition to have all church staff clean shaven. I would have been fired a long time ago. A dispute over whether the worship leader should have his shoes on during the service. And I could go on and on. If you were to sum up all these arguments into one word, that word would be idolatry. Usually when we think of idolatry, we think of like sex or drugs or alcohol. We go to extremes. But in a lot of our churches, we are practicing idolatry and we don't even know it. Anything that gets in the way of our worship of our Lord is idolatry. That can be our habits, that can be our traditions, that can be even our preferences. A lot of us think we're being spiritual with our idols, but we're really not being spiritual. We're saying that our idols are really God worship, but it's not really God worship. We're disguising our preferences and our traditions and our habits as God worship. And we really want to worship God, but we want to worship our idols at the same time. But something's going to give. Jesus says you can't serve two masters. Either you're going to love one and you're going to hate the other. And that goes with even church idolatry, which we don't talk about a lot. Has anybody ever dated two people at the same time? This is confession time. It's okay. Anybody? Right here. It was not good. It was not exciting. This wasn't recent, by the record. This was a long time ago, so no gossip. It's tough to give two people at the same time a lot of attention and a lot of emotion. It just does not work. And when you're trying to worship God, and you're trying to worship these idols that you say are godly, at the same time, you're trying to give love and attention and emotion to two things that you want to worship. But one's going to give. And unfortunately, this happens a lot. There are a lot of people that try to be married, but then they try to have a relationship on the side. It happens all the time. But something's going to give eventually. You got somebody trying to give love and attention and devotion to two people at once, but something's going to give. You can't serve two masters. You're either going to love one, or you're going to hate the other. We're continuing our series in the story of Gideon. Last week, we were at the beginning of chapter 6 in Judges. If you know anything about Judges, there was a 300-year cycle going on after the time of Joshua, where God's people were getting real rebellious, and then they would get in captivity. Then they'd be like, okay, we want to get out of captivity. We need a judge to get us out of this captivity. God would send a judge. The judge would get them out of captivity. They would have a time of peace, and they'd go back to their old ways. Oh, we're in captivity again. We need a judge. Judge would get them out of captivity. There'd be a time of peace. And then they'd go back to their old ways, and oh, we're in trouble again. We're in captivity. We need a judge. That was the period that was going on during the time of Gideon. And more specifically, as Gideon was getting called to be a warrior, the Israelites were in Midianite captivity for about 7 years when Gideon was being called to be a warrior. And last week, we talked about the angel of the Lord calling Gideon to be a warrior, and how Gideon's call to be a warrior parallels our call to be warriors of God, because we're fighting a spiritual battle every day. This week, we're looking at a part of the story of Gideon, where Gideon is challenged to get rid of idols in his hometown before he can fulfill his mission. And we're looking at a time with God's people, where God's people, more specifically in Gideon's hometown, are trying to worship God, but they're also trying to worship idols at the same time, which is very similar to a lot of our churches. We've got a lot of people that want to worship God and worship their traditional idols. Specifically in Manasseh, where Gideon was, there was worship of Asherah and there was worship of Baal, but they also believed in God and they wanted to serve God at the same time. But something was going to give eventually if they went on this path. So that's our setting this morning as we read Judges. Chapter 6 this morning, verses 25 to 32. God's people, specifically in Manasseh, are trying to worship God, but they're also trying to worship Asherah and Baal at the same time. And something's going to give. You can't serve two masters. Starting at Judges 6:25. This is right after Gideon made an altar to the Lord, after the angel of the Lord called Gideon to deliver God's people from the Midianites. That same night the Lord said to him, the same night that he made the altar, "Take the second bull from your father's herd, the one 7 years old. Tear down your father's altar to Baal and cut down the Asherah pole beside it. Then build a proper kind of altar to the Lord your God on top of this height. Using the wood of the Asherah pole that you cut down, offer the second bull as a burnt offering." So Gideon took 10 of his servants and did as the Lord told him. But because he was afraid of his family and the townspeople, he did it at night rather than in the daytime. In the morning, when the people of the town got up, there was Baal's altar, demolished, with the Asherah pole beside it cut down, and the second bull sacrificed on the newly built altar. They asked each other, "Who did this?" When they carefully investigated, they were told, "Gideon, son of Joash, did it." The people of the town demanded of Joash, "Bring out your son. He must die because he has broken down Baal's altar and cut down the Asherah pole beside it." But Joash replied to the hostile crowd around him, "Are you going to plead Baal's cause? Are you trying to save him? Whoever fights for him shall be put to death by morning. Baal really is a god. He can defend himself when someone breaks down his altar." So because Gideon broke down Baal's altar, they gave him the name Jerubbaal that day, saying, "Let Baal contend with him." So the angel of the Lord told Gideon, "If you're going to live out your mission for me, you have to get rid of the idol worship in your environment. Because you can't serve me and idols. Your people can't just serve me and idols. Something has to give. You can't serve two masters." And we learn a lot about getting rid of idols in our own environment from this scenario. First of all, we find out that we need support when we're getting idols out of our own environment. We need support when we're getting rid of things that get in the way of our worship of God. Let's look at verse 27 in Judges chapter 6. So Gideon took 10 of his servants and did as the Lord told him. After the angel of the Lord told Gideon to get rid of the idols in his hometown, Gideon took 10 of his servants with him to get rid of these idols in his hometown. He took 10 of his servants because he needed support. He could not get rid of these idols on his own. And if you see, Gideon went at night to do this because he was afraid. And if he would have went by himself, he might have chickened out. So he also needed those people there to help keep his courage up. We are always going to have idols that we need to get rid of in our lives. Because we're Christians, we're human. Because we're human, we're going to deal with sin. Because we're going to deal with sin, we're going to deal with idols all the time. We're always going to deal with things that get in the way of our worship of God. And you are always going to need support if idols are running your life. You cannot do this journey called Christianity on your own, especially when you're dealing with getting rid of idols in your environment. Do you have accountability? Do you have people you can talk to when you're struggling with idol worship? Do you have people that are going to listen to you? Do you have people that aren't going to spread rumors about you? Do you have people that are going to pray for you? Do you understand the power of prayer, especially with God's people? We had our first prayer meeting in a long time at this church this past Wednesday, and it was powerful, let me tell you. There's just something about God's people praying for one another. You just feel the presence of the Lord on a different level. And when you have prayer warriors, when you have a lot of people praying for you, you feel the presence of God, I believe, on a different level when God's people are praying for you. You feel a sense of confidence and courage you didn't have before when God's people are praying for you. You're going to want to give up when you're trying to get rid of idols in your life. It can be uncomfortable to get rid of idols because getting rid of sin, in a nutshell, is very uncomfortable, isn't it? Because sin feels good. Sin is fun. If you don't think that, you're probably lying to yourself. Sin is uncomfortable to get rid of because it's fun. It feels good. It gives you a false sense of fun. It gives you a false sense of feeling good. That's what idolatry does. When things get in the way of your worship of God, it feels good. It feels fun. And when you try to get rid of idolatry in your life, you're going to lose some friends. You're going to have family that abandons you. You may not have the best job. You may not have a lot of money. And you're going to want to throw in the towel with getting rid of idols. And you need those people in your life to encourage you, to build you up when you want to give up. That's why Jesus sent his disciples out 2 by 2 and not alone. Because we were never meant to do this thing called Christianity on our own. Because one of those people might stumble and fall, and they need that other person to build them up, to pray for them, to hold them accountable. That's why we create small groups. That's why Mark and his group of people have a home group. So people can grow together, so people can get to know each other, so people can be open with one another about their struggles, so that they don't have to do life alone. That's the kind of culture we're trying to create here. You're going to get caught in idolatry if you don't open up to people, if you don't have close friends, if you don't have people that are praying for you and pouring into your life. It's easy to let pride get in the way of that. Oh, I'm good. I don't have any problems. I don't need to tell anybody my problems. Life is all good. I don't want anybody to know my dirty laundry. Those are all excuses. Those are not reasons. Remember the difference between an excuse and a reason? An excuse is an explanation of why something is the way it is, where you're putting the buck on everybody else. A reason is where everybody's taking responsibility for their actions. There is no excuse for not living life with people. And home groups are one way we do that. And having prayer services is another way we do that. You gotta have support from people when you're trying to get rid of idols in your life. We also see that you're going to go through hardships when you try to get rid of idols. You're going to have hardships when you try to get rid of idols. After Gideon got rid of the idols in his hometown, the men of the town were furious. If you look at verse 29, it says, these men of the town, they asked each other, who did this? When they carefully investigated, they were told, Gideon, son of Joash, did it. The people of the town demanded of Joash, bring out your son. He must die because he has broken down Baal's altar and cut down the Asherah pole beside it. Gideon was getting ready for a death sentence because he got rid of the idols in his hometown, the townspeople were furious. Gideon was going through a little persecution. When we try to get rid of idols in our lives, we are going to go through persecution. People are not going to like us. It is not going to be comfortable. Because there again, Christianity in a nutshell is not about comfort, is it? It's about living a calling that's higher than yourself. Which means you've got to sacrifice a lot of comfort. You can have good times, but you've got to sacrifice comfort for the sake of worshiping God, for the sake of not having idols. In other countries, persecution's on a different level. We have it pretty good here. I think the story of Gideon is a perfect story of what goes on in places like Africa or places like, the Middle East, when people's lives are on the line, when they want to worship the Lord, when they want to get rid of idol worship in their village. We have it pretty good here. I mean, we complain about not having prayer in schools. We complain about how God's not in the schools a lot, but in reality, we have a lot of spiritual freedom here in this country compared to a lot of other places still. And we have to take advantage of that. We can't take that for granted. But there again, we do have some hardships when we get rid of idols. You're going to have family that's not going to want to talk to you. You're going to have friends that don't want to spend time with you. You might have family members that don't want to give you any inheritance. And that can be a tough one. You can't hang out at the same places you used to hang out at. Because Christianity's tough. It's going to be that way until you die. Little news flash. But you're going to have hardships. Just expect they're going to come. Jesus said, in this world you will have trouble, but take heart. I have overcome the world. This is only temporary. These hardships are around to make us stronger in our faith. They're a test. And if God always gives you the answers to the test, it's not a real test because you can't see where your faith is. If God's always spoon-feeding you answers for why hardships happen. And tests are supposed to be tough. They're not supposed to be easy. You've got to see a lot of your hardships through getting rid of idolatry as tests. Where you're going to be a stronger Christian, where you're going to help other people who are going through the same kind of tests. But remember, you are going to have hardships when you're trying to get rid of idols in your life. Just like Gideon was going through hardships, getting rid of idols in his hometown. If we look at verse 31, we see Gideon's father, Joash, replying in an interesting way to this death sentence that was getting thrown on Gideon. At verse 31, but Joash replied to the hostile crowd around him, are you going to plead Baal's cause? Are you trying to save him? Whoever fights for him shall be put to death by morning. If Baal really is a god, he can defend himself when someone breaks down his altar. So because Gideon broke down Baal's altar, they gave him the name Jerubbaal that day, saying, let Baal contend with him. Now, was there some father instinct going on here? Hey, I want to protect my son. I don't want my son to die. Yeah, there was probably a little bit of that. But I still think Gideon's dad was influenced by his son's courage and passion. I think Gideon's dad was sold on Gideon's courage and passion because Gideon's father had not seen that kind of courage and passion out of his son before. Because they weren't from a respected clan. And Gideon was from a lower position in his household. So Gideon's dad was probably blown away by this courage and this passion to get rid of these idols. And that changed Gideon's father's life. Because not only did Gideon's dad stand up for his son, but Gideon's dad gave a logical argument for why God might be doing something in this situation. He says, if Baal is that powerful, why do we need to defend Baal? Let Baal defend himself. Gideon's passion and Gideon's courage led Gideon's father to rethink his own faith. And because he was rethinking his own faith, he was questioning whether or not God was really powerful. You know, he was able to give this kind of logic to the people around him. When you are passionate about getting rid of idols in your life, there are going to be a lot of people that are going to be ticked. There are going to be a lot of people that are uncomfortable. There are going to be some people that are going to be influenced by your passion to get rid of idols. And they're going to examine their own lives like Gideon's dad did. And they're going to change because they are searching for the truth, because of your passion and courage to get rid of idols. You don't know who you're influencing around you when you're getting rid of idols. There was a story in the 19th century in the South Seas about a tribal chief who was converted to Christianity. And he gathered up all the idols of his people. He told the idols he was going to destroy them. Then he gave them the chance to run away. He destroyed all the ones that sat there like dumb statues, which was all of them, basically. Somebody changed his life because of their example. He questioned his own faith. Because he questioned his own faith, he was willing to test his gods. His gods failed the test because of somebody else's influence. From them getting rid of idolatry in their life. Idolatry is going to look different for everybody. And it does happen in church. And people throw the God card over their idolatry, like we just talked about earlier. Sometimes we're not as godly as we think we are. When we're trying to save a pew, or we're trying to save a table, or we're trying to worry about somebody's beard, or we're trying to worry about somebody's clothing. God knows whether you're having idolatry in your life or not. That's not for anybody to answer in this room. And for others, it may be the obvious ones like alcohol and, sex and drugs and rock and roll, or whatever you want to call it. You know your idolatry in your life. If you're going to live out God's mission for you, you've got to get rid of it. You need people around you to help you get rid of it. You're going to have to deal with hardships, these tests. But those tests are going to make you stronger. Those tests are going to give you the opportunity to influence others that are going through the same tests. And through all that, you are going to influence people, and people are going to start questioning their own faith in God's. And hopefully there's a ripple effect. Idols will tear up your faith, because idols are sin, in a nutshell. And it's going to be uncomfortable to get rid of idols, but when you do, it's going to make an impact. Why don't you pray with me?